Man, I love this. I love South Texas.
The Kansas City Royals select Blake Mitchell.
Corpus Christi John Paul II are the state champions.
South Texas, we're super proud of the baseball, and it's only going to get better.
All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the South Texas High School Baseball Podcast. Today we have another big leaguer on. We've got Rob Zastryzny. Did I pronounce that correctly?
That's exactly right.
All right,
you
perfect.
Definitely practiced, but it's okay.
I did practice. I made sure to get it right. Yeah. But we're here in Calallen. We are at the Wheelhouse facility. It's right off of Leopard near the high school, right in this general area, right kind of behind Home Depot and everything. So big shout out to Mike Velasquez for letting us use the facility on short notice. We really appreciate that. And be sure to come by and get some swings in. Be sure to come by and get better and support Mike in this local spot for everyone. So again, big thanks, and we're looking forward to having some more episodes out here. Rob, you're here for the holidays, I imagine.
Yep.
Back home. So I really appreciate you making the time. I appreciate the director of operations for allowing this interview to take place. She's off screen here, but let's talk about all things baseball. Let's talk about your childhood and growing up here. I know we talked a little bit off camera just a minute ago about how you guys ended up in Corpus. So just give us a little bit of background. Tell us about yourself.
I was born in Canada and then moved here when I was about 1.5, 2 years old, and been here ever since. But I took Canadian schooling, and fun fact, I was homeschooled until 6th grade, which was awesome. I got to spend a lot of time with my family, went on a bunch of vacations. It was less awesome when I got to school and didn't know how to interact with people, but homeschooling was great. And then at a very young age, I knew I loved baseball the most. My parents put me in every sport imaginable. I played hockey. There was like one league here where you could use the rink for like 1 hour a week. And so they had me in a hockey league, and I tried to be as Canadian as possible. But for some reason, every time I stepped on a baseball field, it was like time flew by. I was on the field for 10 minutes, but it was a full game and everything. And I love baseball the most. And so it's always been my passion, and I always love talking about it. I always love playing it. I like practicing. I like doing everything. And I've known that from a very young age.
And tell us about the way that you ended up down here. I know you told me a little bit about your dad was just kind of looking for somewhere warm, and Corpus popped up or something like that. Give us the breakdown.
So Canada gets very cold from what I've heard. And there was one winter they were getting me and my brother dressed to go do things. They had to shovel the sidewalk. They had to put our little coats on. They had to take our coats off, and they just looked at each other and they were like, "We're done with this. Like, let's move somewhere warmer." And my dad was like, "I've always wanted to live near a beach," because he'd never been near one in Edmonton, Alberta. And so they looked, and they both had pretty good jobs at the time, and they both had jobs they could do anywhere. So they're like, let's move to the United States and let's move somewhere with water. And my dad landed on Corpus Christi for whatever reason, and he's a very frugal guy. So he was like, it's cheap, it's got a nice beach, it's got everything we need. And so we ended up here, and then they looked everywhere. They looked in town, they looked Flower Bluff, they looked GP, they looked everywhere. And they just settled on Calallen.
Cool. I love it. Canadians ending up down on the South Texas beach.
Don't know how it happened, but it happened.
Well, cool. So let's talk about your baseball experience growing up. Did you grow up playing like Little League, T-ball around here as well?
Yeah, so I played pretty much all locally. I played T-ball at Oil Belt, and I played, there's a pony league out there by Toloso Midway. I played there. And then I remember one day my dad was like, "You love baseball, like, why don't we go play in town?" Because anytime we played any in-town kids, they would just beat the crap out of us. So my dad was like, "Why don't you go play in town?" And so we actually met Jose Trevino's dad and Jose, and we jumped on their team, which was the Corpus Christi Dodgers at the time. And we just played in all the tournaments and stuff out there. And I mean, I might have been the worst player on the team. That's just how I remember it. And I just remember being like, okay, like, I love this. These guys are great. And I just tried to be like those guys. And Jose was like 2 years younger than me. He was hitting the ball further than I was. And I was like, okay, I'm late. I need to get in here and do this. And so we did that. And then I jumped on a team called the Corpus Christi Barracudas. And that was like a bunch of kids from Ray and Moody and Carroll and everything like that. And they were great. Like, they were, like, we played against them a bunch. I was on another team and played against them, and they were the best team in Corpus. And so my dad was like, if we ever get a chance, I want you to play on that team. And so one day the team I was on didn't have a tournament, and the Corpus Christi Barracudas were in one. And my dad reached out and was like, hey, if you want him for a weekend, we're free if you need a pitcher or whatever. And they're like, yeah, we love Rob. We played against him for years. He can come play for us. And I played for them for probably 5 years.
Okay.
And they were great. They treated everybody fairly. We practiced 3 times a week, but like, actually practice baseball. Like we took ground balls, we took fly balls, we did all sorts of situational things, which I had never done before. It's usually like field the ground ball, throw it to first, your job's done. But they were like, okay, now you need to back up this base. Like after you give up a double, you need to go back up third. And it was just this very advanced baseball at a young age. And I just fell in love with it. I was like, okay, this feels like baseball. We learned how to steal bases. We learned how to hold runners. We learned how to do all these small little things. And we would go play all over the country. I think we went Arizona, went to Florida once or twice. Like we played everywhere, and they weren't afraid of anyone. We'd play, if there was no tournament for 11U, we'd play in a 13U tournament. There was just no fear, and all we did is want to play. And every single one of those guys on that team played high school baseball or college. And it was just, we lucked into it, and it was a great experience.
So did you play with the Barracudas up until high school?
I did, yeah. So I think we're all the same age. We're all in the 2010 draft or high school class. So once we got to high school, we all kind of parted ways. Like most of those guys actually played varsity early on, and I ended up playing on the freshman team. And then shortly after that, we realized that I wasn't getting enough baseball in. Like I wasn't playing much of football or basketball or anything. And my dad was like, there's this team called the South Texas Sliders. He's like, do you want to go play with them? They play all over Texas. It's called the Premier League or whatever it was at the time. And so I was like, sure. And so all summer, like everyone else was going to the pool and stuff. And my dad was like, we got a tournament. We got to leave on Thursday. We'll come back Sunday. Leave on Thursday, come back Sunday. And I remember fighting him on it. I was like, Dad, like there's a pool party this weekend or whatever it is. And my dad was like, okay, if you don't want to do it, we're good. Like we won't do it. And I was like, no, I want to do it. And so we just played. I played year round until I left for college, really. Like even in high school, I'd play winters here. I'd go play for the Sliders. I did everything. Like I probably played 100 plus games a year. That's all I wanted to do. And I attribute that. I actually got the idea from a guy named Logan Verrett, who kind of gave me the pathway to success. He was on JV, I think, as a sophomore, and came back his junior year and was really good. And my dad was like, okay, like this kid, we didn't know who he was, and now he's like a very, very good varsity player. So we talked to his dad, and he was like, try the slider team. So we did, and then Logan went to Baylor, and I remember talking to him. I was like, where should I go? He's like, go somewhere where you can play. Like I pretty much just followed Logan Verrett's path, and it ended up working out for me. But I wanted to shout him out because I feel like Texas baseball, South Texas baseball, there's a lot of names being thrown around, and his kind of flies under the radar. Like he pitched in the big leagues, played till he was like 34 years old.
Yeah.
And I mean, nothing was ever given to that kid. Like he would just go play all year round. You wouldn't hear from Logan for the whole summer, and he'd come back throwing 4 miles an hour harder, hitting the ball a lot harder, playing better defense. And he just put the work in, and he was one of the first ones to really do it.
When did you become to be a pitcher only? Was it pretty early on?
That was as soon as I got to the University of Missouri. So
okay.
I was a pretty good hitter in high school, but me and my dad kind of understood like the better competition we played in summer ball, the worse I got. And he was like, okay, you can't really hit off speed. So we'd work on it. And I got pretty good at Calallen, and I ended up hitting behind Wyatt forever. So it was nice because the pitcher would focus all their energy on Wyatt. And then I'd have a nice little layup at bat afterwards when they're exhausted from giving up an RBI double to Wyatt. But I got to Missouri as a two-way guy.
Okay.
And I went to my first hitters meeting there, and I sat through it. I had my notebook. I wrote everything down. I was like, okay, I'm going to play the outfield. I'm going to be a hitter/pitcher. And my pitching coach, who is like a second father to me, I'd love to talk about him a bunch. He was like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm going to hit. And he was like, do you want to play professionally? And I was like, I don't know. Because at the time I didn't. I just wanted to go play college baseball. And he was like, I think you're pretty good. He was like, I think you're going to waste your time hitting. He's like, you're not very good, and it's going to take you a long time to get good. He's like, why don't you just pitch? He's like, trust me, like I will keep you busy. You'll be doing all the work you need to do. You'll be physically able to do everything. Just pitch. And I was like, okay. And I trusted him, and the rest was history.
Okay. Yeah, we'll be sure to come back to your pitching coach. That team of Barracudas, when you're still young before high school, was it, I know you said it was primarily guys in town like Ray and I guess Moody, some of the Corpus schools, but did you consider not going to Calallen, or was it always you're going to go to Calallen, and regardless of how much the other parents try to persuade you to go to Ray or whatever?
With how I was at baseball at the time, they weren't really persuading too much. But no, we always knew that we were going to go to Calallen. But a lot of people, I feel like when you talk to people, I've listened to a couple interviews, they're like, I always wanted to, I knew I was going to play college ball. I knew I was going to do this, or like Wyatt especially. Wyatt knew he was going to play pro ball in 8th grade. And I knew it too. Like he was just the best player in the world. Same with Courtney Hawkins. He was great. My goal was to play on my varsity team. I was like, that's it. And like wherever we go from there, great. Like I would love to play forever, but that was kind of my goal. And so Calallen had a great baseball team and always had. And I remember going to the state championship, I think in 2005 was the year that I went and watched. And I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And so I set my goal to do that. And it took me until my junior year. Like I made it up late as a sophomore as kind of like a defensive replacement, maybe a pinch runner here or there. But I just watched those guys. Like they didn't need any help. They were probably the best team to roll through Calallen other than maybe Wyatt senior year or junior year. And I just remember thinking like, I want to play for the Calallen Wildcats. So it was always Calallen for me. That's kind of where I wanted to be.
Cool. And I know that you and Wyatt basically grew up on the same street, right? Or right across the street from each other?
Yeah, right across the street.
And it's here in Calallen, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, makes even more sense.
Yeah.
Go to Calallen.
Well, the first day I met Wyatt, I hated him. I couldn't stand the kid. And I've told him this. I actually spoke at his wedding and I said that I couldn't stand him because my best friend in the world moved out of that house. And Wyatt moved in. And I was like, who's this kid? And he was 2 years younger than me. And he's just a ball of energy. And I was like, no, whatever. So I played with him and we played outside every single day. And I think he said it in his, but I attribute me getting to the big leagues 100% first off to Wyatt. Like I wouldn't have made it without him because that was our dream collectively. Like he told me one day, he says this all the time. He's like, let's play professional baseball. This was, I think I was 8 and he was 6 or something around those times.
Wow.
He was like, let's play professional baseball. And I was like, okay, kid, sure. But I wanted to, like, I was like, and we did that every day. My parents bought us like rollerblades and hockey stuff. We had a basketball hoop. We had everything, but no matter what, we'd end the day playing baseball. And that's just kind of how we got started. But yeah, I attribute everything to him. Like even in high school, I would have like a bad outing or something and we'd be in the car ride home because we drove everywhere together. Like our parents would be at the game. We'd be like, no thanks, I'm taking Wyatt home. And he'd be like, no, tough game. And I'd be like, yeah, like I just felt like I wasn't getting calls. And he'd be like, no, you just didn't pitch well. He's like, you were soft. You tried to stay away from contact. He's like, you didn't attack the center of the zone. And he'd be catching me and he'd be like, you need to get after it. And we'd get after it that whole week. He'd be like, I'd throw a midweek bullpen to Wyatt and Wyatt would help me with everything. And like, he was essentially like a younger brother. I had an older brother, but he was my younger brother. And he told me exactly how it is. Just like on your podcast, he just says exactly what comes to his brain and there's no sugarcoating it. And I love that about him. He just told me, he's like, you suck today. Or if I had a great game, he's like, dude, you're a stud. Like you're going to be great. Yeah. And like, he just held me accountable and I did the same for him.
Yeah. I love it. Did it become pretty easy for you guys while y'all were in high school, or I guess because you were older, as you guys got older, that you were pitching to him and y'all are just basically playing catch every day, if not throwing a near bullpen every day and getting to know each other that well as far as pitching and catching on that side of things?
Yeah, I remember throwing to him was super easy. We had another catcher as well who was very good. He went and played ball forever. Like he was, he went and played college ball for 3 or 4 years. He was really good. But throwing to Wyatt was one of those where if anything was going sideways, I would want to throw to Wyatt during the midweek and he would help me. Like he'd be playing shortstop or he'd be playing wherever. And I'd come in and he'd be like, hey, you're starting to drift. Or he's like, hey, like you're throwing too many sliders. He's like, attack him with your fastball. And like my catcher would do the same thing. He was great. And I actually threw to him for a long time too. But it's just Wyatt was like the coach that I never had. Like Chapman and Lopez would get after me. And then the second I left the field, you don't hear from him, right? Like they're not calling you and being like, hey, make sure you do, like Wyatt would be like, hey, we're going to go grab dinner. He's like, and then let's go watch a baseball game, or hey, let's go to the front yard and play catch. Like after a game, a varsity baseball game, or he'd be like, hey, we're going to stay after and hit at the facility until the lights turn off. And like, that was that was my guy. And that's the reason, that's how I learned work ethic. Because Wyatt was the one, he'd text me at 6 p.m. and I'd be playing video games and he'd be like, hey, let's go hit. And I'm like, dude, we just got home from practice. He's like, yeah, so? And so I'd go pick him up and we'd go hit. And that's how I learned how to play baseball.
When both of you were getting recruited to play in college and ultimately go on to play pro, those early conversations of college offers and visits, would y'all share those with each other? And you're kind of thinking like, oh, I think I'm going to go to Mizzou, or oh, I think I'm going to commit to Texas or whatever. Well, do you remember what those conversations were like?
Yeah. So my dad was like in my corner for that. So every person that called me, I'd put it on speakerphone. And like my dad never wanted to butt into my life. Like he never wanted to coach me. He never wanted to do anything. He did, but he was like, if I don't know what the answer is, I'm going to find it for you. And that was his method, right? So he would listen to these and he would do as much research as he could on schools. And like, so Baylor would call and they'd be like, hey, you're going to start as a freshman. And my dad would pull up like, okay, the last 15 years, they've had 6 players get above 60 innings as a freshman. And like, he would like fact check everything that everybody said just to give me the knowledge. But Wyatt was the one where like, I would tell him like, hey, my gut's telling me Missouri. And he's like, go. I was like, but I'm scared. I want to stay close to home. He's like, go, get out of here, go. And like my dad was doing the same thing. But I tried to help Wyatt as much as I could with recruitment, but his was every school in the country wanted him and every team in the MLB wanted him. So it was like, I didn't have to push him in any direction. Yeah, it was just like, yeah, he's going to go to Texas, or he's going to go to OU, or he's going to go to a big school, and then he's going to get drafted, or he'll get drafted first. But he helped me out a ton because like I kind of let it affect me a little bit, where I was like, I'm going to a tournament in Joplin and Missouri's going to be there. He's like, who cares? He's like, just go throw your game, go be you. And like, I would text him after the game, why I threw 7 scores. He's like, great, see you tomorrow when you get back. We'll go hit. Like that was just what he did, man. He loved baseball and he was all about it.
Okay, so you were part of the 2008 state championship team, is that right?
Yeah.
You guys went something ridiculous, like 42-1, I think.
I think so.
What was that like for you?
They were the best team I'd ever played on at that time. And it was Logan Verrett was one of the most fun to watch. Jordan John, who's another name that needs to be thrown around more when you talk about like elite high school baseball players. He went to OU for 4 years and got drafted in the 4th round, I think. But watching those guys go about their business, right? Like Coach Lopez was very hard on these guys, and he was very like articulate about what he wanted them to do. And I was like, how is he still coaching these guys? Like, they're the best 2 players I'd ever seen pitching wise. And he was still on them. He was like, you got to be better. You got to execute better. You got to do this. And then sure enough, like we'd get out of Corpus and we'd go play a San Antonio team that was good. And like all those lessons would click for him, and Logan would shove and Jordan would shove, and we'd move on to the next round. And I just remember thinking like, okay, Logan's going to leave next year. Jordan's going to take over that top spot. I want that number 2 spot. So I would just sit in the corner and listen. I was probably annoying, just like listening to them being coached, and them like Jordan or Logan would be throwing a bullpen. I would just be standing behind them like watching, like just annoying little kid. But I wanted to gather as much information because these guys were head and shoulders better than me. And I was like, I want to be on their level. I want to do what they're doing. And then Logan left, went to Baylor, had a great career. And then Jordan took me under his wing and was like, you need to do this. Like, you're throwing too many off speeds. You're not backdooring pitches, whatever it was. And Jordan was like, you need to do this. I'm going to help you with it. And so I had Jordan John, and I had Wyatt, and I had Coach Lopez, and I just soaked up as much knowledge as I could from them. Yeah.
And wanting to learn and glean from those that are better than you, I think is something that is really timeless, because just now, but what, an hour and a half ago, we were just on the field there at Calallen on the football field, because the baseball field's being turfed.
Yeah.
Rest in peace, natural grass. But
it's gone.
But yeah, you were just teaching some high school guys here how to throw a sweeper. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So wanting to learn and glean and learn this new pitch from someone better than obviously someone in the bigs, as high level as it gets. But yeah, that's pretty cool. Like, being able to, you were in that position in high school wanting to learn to get that number 2 spot. And here these current high schoolers are now, all these years later, are wanting to learn from you, who is obviously one's in their shoes. So that's pretty cool, being able to connect those dots.
Yeah, I enjoy that a ton. Every time I come back, I try to, like, they have a couple lefty studs there at Calallen that, like, watching them throw, it's like I see a lot of myself. I see a lot of Justin Lampkin. I see a lot of those guys in them. And I don't know how Calallen keeps getting left-handed pitchers, but I hope they keep coming forever. But
it was a lefties only club on that field earlier.
Seriously. And so watching these guys throw, and then like they're hungry to learn. Like, just talking to them, like, you can see their vision. It doesn't like fade off. Like, okay, like, when's this old man gonna shut up? Like, they're like locked into what I'm saying, and it makes me want to help them more. And they do a great job. And I just, like, they were very good last year, both of them. They both threw really well. And I know that, like, anytime you have success, sometimes that's the worst thing that can possibly happen, right? Like, I don't know, one of them had like a 2 ERA or 1 ERA. I can't remember. I don't care about stats, but they both threw over 90 innings. They both shoved. They both stepped up in huge moments. And then they're out with me. Like, how do I throw this? Like, how do I get better? I want to get lefties out better. Like, my command kind of went bad at the end. Like, how do I keep strong to make sure I don't fall off during the end of the year? Like, they all just want to learn. And then talking to Justin Lampkin, who's really figured out, like, he's great. He's an unbelievable college arm. Like, I hope he plays forever. And even him, he's like, eyes on me, listening to what I'm saying, and I'm asking him for advice too. I'm like, dude, how do you look the way that you look? How do you throw? Like, he was throwing a changeup to me today, and I was like, I can't see the spin on that. I was like, how do you throw that? And it's like, I'm trying to gain as much knowledge, and he's trying to gain some. So it ended up working out really nicely. And like, they're all nice kids, and it's really nice to see like that class. I think they're juniors. Like, that class is like the class that like committed to baseball. And it's like, I'm not saying don't play multiple sports, like, do it. I wasn't good enough to. I was a very late bloomer. But these kids are like, I play baseball, I play year round, I want to learn. Like, I have a coach, I do lessons, I do all these things. And it's like, that's how you get to where you need to get. Like, if you want to play college ball, you got to commit at a young age, and those kids have. And like, I'm excited to see what happens with those two, especially. They're incredible. And obviously Lampkin too. I think he's going to have a great year this year.
Yeah. And that whole Calallen team, I mean, state finalist, state runner-up last year.
Yeah.
I expect them to get there again this season, if not win the whole thing.
Yeah, and that experience is so valuable. Like going there my sophomore year, I didn't play much. Like I just was like a cheerleader, but just soaking up all the information. And then when I was in that moment the next year, I knew what to do from what I saw.
Yeah,
because like experience is experience. Like you can't have it until you have it. But getting as close as they did is just going to drive them more. And like, and I'm not glad they lost, but they did. And now they have to go show that they're ready to win. And so they're going to win it this year. And then after that, it's like, okay, how do you win 2 in a row? And it's like, it's always the next thing. You can never just be like, oh, we got this. And they definitely don't have that, which is great.
Yeah. I guess the most recent state championship would be the one that you're part of. Is that right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Does that make you feel kind of old?
Makes me feel old, but it also reminds me of 2010 when we should have won. And we just, Brenham had such a good team that year. And, I was hurt. I threw the first game to get us there. I didn't throw particularly well, but we won, I think, like 7-2.
And that was what, your senior year?
Yeah, my senior year. And then Wyatt carried us through the state game. But the guy they threw, like, he overmatched me and a couple other guys. And they definitely deserved to win that year. But it's just like, that's something I still think about. Like, I don't have any regrets at all. Like, it happened the way it happened. But the only time I've ever cried on a baseball field was after the state championship game. Not because we lost. Like, I was going to Missouri. Like, my career wasn't over. It was my last game I thought I was ever going to play with Wyatt. And it ended up being. And I was like, okay, like, I'm never going to play another baseball game with my younger brother. And that was super sad for me. But watching him do everything he's done in his career. And then we played against each other in pro ball, which I thought was the coolest thing in the world.
Yeah, that is pretty sweet. Let's move into your college days. You obviously attend the University of Missouri.
Yeah.
Go Tigers.
Go Tigers forever.
What other schools were in the running for you to consider playing at?
So my college recruiting was pretty good. I was kind of seen as a projectable lefty, right? Like I was throwing 86 at the time, but I was with Calallen, which brought a lot of like positive things. Like teams were like, okay, like Logan did it, Jordan did it. They have this kid Wyatt who's really good. Like they saw Calallen as like a baseball factory. Like these kids are going to produce at the next level. So I had a decent amount of offers as far as like, hey, you can come play for us. A lot of like minimum scholarships. It's like McMurray State and small schools like that would give me a little bit more money. But the big schools, I wanted to go in the Big 12. And the reason I wanted to go in the Big 12 was I felt like I threw well enough and I did enough in my career to play at that level. And I just had a couple schools tell me I wasn't good enough. I remember A&M specifically was like, hey, you're not at the caliber of player that we need here. Texas was like, if you go to JUCO, maybe. And then Baylor recruited me and then ended up picking another lefty from Lake Travis over me, which he was great. Like he definitely deserved it. But it was just one of those where like once all that happened, it was TCU, Baylor, and Missouri were my final 3. And Tony Vitello was at Missouri. And I went to a college visit with Vitello and I fell in love with him. I was like, this guy is who I want to be with. Like, I want him to coach me forever. Like, I can learn so much from this guy. He was like an up-and-coming guy at the time. And about 3 weeks before I got there, he left for TCU. And so that ended up not working out. But I just remember I was playing a tournament in Oklahoma, and the Oklahoma coach was reaching out to me and talking to me. And so I called him, and I was like, hey, I'm going to be passing through Norman. Like, can I stop by and see the facility and everything? And they're like, we're good, man. And whatever. And I remember from that moment on, I was like, I'm going to the Big 12 and I'm going to give it to every single team that said no to me. And so Missouri was my best option to play. And so I went there.
And so at the time, that was before Missouri was in the SEC?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
My first 2 years were the Big 12 and my last year was in the SEC.
Okay, gotcha. So yeah, you set foot on campus at Missouri. What was that like? How different immediately from high school did you realize, oh, okay, this is a little more difficult, a little more serious?
Yeah. It was immediately. I remember the first day we went and we played catch at the facility. Nobody was there, like no coaches or anything. It was just the freshmen, like guys coming in. And while we were there, the cages were open, so I was just swinging and hitting the ball off the tee because I was a two-way guy at the time. And the next day, the pitching coach jumped down my throat. He was like, you think you can just come in here and play games and have fun? Like, this is a business, son. Like, this is college ball. Like, we're not here to have fun. And I was like, whoa, are you sure? I thought baseball was supposed to be fun. And it ended up being, but it was like, that was the first time, like, I got my like jumped down my throat from a guy I didn't know. Like Lopez yelled at me my whole career, but I've known him for years.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just this guy. I was like, he's like, hey, my name's Matt Hobbs. Stop acting up. And I was like, whoa, dude, can you yell at me already? And then I realized pretty quickly it's like seniors that hadn't played. And they're like, yeah, I'm trying to get on the field this year. And I was like, you haven't played in 3 years? And they're like, no. And I was like, I have to step my game up if I want to get on this field. And that's exactly what I had to do.
Mm. Was it difficult for you to manage the student athlete balance of your college life?
My freshman year it was. I had a really great roommate. He's one of my best friends in the world. His name's Dylan Everett. He socially taught me how to be an acceptable human being because in Calallen, like I had like a 9 p.m. curfew. Mm-hmm. My whole life, my parents' main goal, they've told me this. They're like, we wanted to get you out of Corpus alive. And then once you went to college, that's on you. And so I had strict curfews. Like I didn't party. I didn't drink. I think I had like 4 total beers in high school and I didn't really do anything. And so I went off to college and I remember Dylan was like, he knew I wasn't very cool. He was like, hey, you want to go to a party? I was like, no, dude, we have practice tomorrow at 3 p.m. And he was like, yeah, do you want to go grab a beer? And I was like, no. And so he was like, okay, if you're going to make it here, he's like, you have to be liked. He's like, you can't be the most hated dude on the team and nobody likes you because you won't hang out with them and you're like only about baseball. He was like, have another life. He was like, have baseball, turn it on, and then once you leave, turn it off. He's like, and whatever. So he taught me how to be a human being there, and it was great. But yeah, initially it's like I took 12 hours every semester, which was the minimum. Yeah. And I made decent enough grades, but like especially once season started, I would just ate, slept, breathed baseball. And so school was like, what can I do to pass? And then baseball. And then as I progressed through college, I realized that it's important to get a degree and it's important to get good grades. And then I started to turn it around. But yeah, it was definitely hard at first.
Okay. Eventually you get drafted after your junior season. When did the draft possibility conversations begin?
It was after my sophomore year. So I was our Friday night guy as a freshman. I remember our actual Friday night guy, he was probably going to be like a 5th or 6th rounder. And him and his advisor were like, look, Matt's going to be a mid top 10 rounder. We want him to throw on Saturdays. And we weren't a very good team. So Missouri was like, okay, Rob, here's what we're going to do. You're going to throw on Fridays. If we win, great. If we lose, who cares? And we're going to try to win on Saturday with Matt Stites. And so that's how we're going to try. We're going to try to win every Saturday and then coin flip every Sunday. And like, it was almost my job to lose on Friday, right? Like I was supposed to be like the Saturday or Sunday guy. And they're like, Rob will throw strikes. Rob will get into 6 innings, 7 innings, and then we can survive and try to win the series because we weren't very good. And I ended up having a pretty good year that year. And so after that year, I was going to Cape Cod, and they shut me down. And they're like, hey, you've thrown 100 innings. You're not going to go. And I was like, oh, whatever. So I took summer school. I trained, and then I gained probably 20 pounds of muscle. And I just put all my emphasis into training. We had a great strength coach, and my pitching coach who I mentioned earlier, his name's Matt Hobbs, who he used to yell at me all the time, but he's at Arkansas now. He's like super guru pitching guy. I still call him. I still talk to him like, hey, I can't get my sweeper to move right. And he's like, well, try this. Like I still talk to that guy about pitching because he's so smart. And he was like, stay here in the summer with me. He was like, I'm going to work out at 6 a.m. And he wouldn't talk to me. He wouldn't do anything. He was like, I'm going to be here. He's like, if you want to show up and be a man, you can show up. And so I'd show up. I'd be at the other end of the weight room working out, and he'd be at his end of the weight room. And then he'd go for a run, and then I'd go for a run, kind of do something similar to him. And he would outwork everyone on the team. And that was the summer I learned that like you can get better at baseball in the weight room. Like I didn't know at the time. I was like, yeah, I'll lift weights. And I just kind of went through the motions. And then that summer. And so going into my sophomore year, I started throwing a little bit harder. And that's when he started seeing some scouts show up at games and some advisors reach out and be like, hey, like I'd like to represent you. And I was like, okay, like this might become a real thing. And same thing my sophomore summer, I threw 110 innings or whatever it was. And my pitching coach was like, we're shutting you down again. This summer, you're going to get after it again. And so I got after it again and then gained another 10 pounds of muscle. And I left there 6'3", 220. I came in 6'1", 172, I think. Wow. Yeah. And so like Matt Hobbs was like, I'm going to make you a man, and you're going to leave here a professional athlete. And then that was our goal from my sophomore year on. So you never got to play in the Cape? No, I didn't. I was going to Falmouth both years too. And they were just like, nope, you're not going. My sophomore year, I was like, I'm going. And they're like, you can go for 5 innings. And so the Cape coach called and he was like, you can come start 1 game and then you have to leave. And I was like, I'll just stay. I'm not going to go do that.
Stay over here. Okay, well, that's pretty sweet. So Matt Hobbs plays a huge part in your pitching and physical development.
Yeah.
Really, once you get to the college level.
Yeah, he was perfect. He was a big, strong guy. Like, I think he was like 6'1", like very strong. And like he played pro ball, I think 2 years prior. And then he was like, okay, I'm going to go coach. And he got the job at Missouri because he was kind of on the forefront of analytics. And at the time it was like, if you got hit, that's your fault. Or if you're getting smashed, it's like, okay, scrap that pitch, it doesn't work. But then analytics came across and it's like, this pitch is great, throw it more. And he was kind of at the forefront of it where we didn't have as much technology, but he could see it. He'd be like, Rob, you throw with a lot of vert, why don't you try throwing at the top of the zone? And I was like, no, who throws at the top of the zone? He's like, you do. And so we started doing it, and he was just like, he was light years ahead of everyone else in college, especially. And he kind of took me on the path of like, this is what the best version of you is, and I'm going to make you that version. When I got to pro ball, that's what they said. They're like, you're good. We don't need to change anything, because Matt Hobbs had already fixed everything that I was doing wrong.
Okay, so your junior season comes and goes. Does it end up being pretty solid? Like, would you say that's the best year that you have?
Yeah, I think so. It definitely finished strong. I started pretty slow, and this would be advice that I'd give anyone going into the draft process. You have to eliminate the draft, because if you're throwing for the draft or you're throwing for a scout in the stands, you're not pitching. You're not being a teammate. You're not doing all that stuff. And so fortunately for me, my first 2 outings were horrible. I think I went like 3 innings, 5, and then like 4 innings, 5 runs. Lost both. So I was 0-2 with a 17.5 ERA. And I was like, well, I'm going to get my degree and go sell insurance. I'm going to go do something. And my coach sat me down and he was like, Rob, I love you to death. Matt Hobbs. He's like, I love you to death. He put his hand on my head and he was like, you have to turn this around. And he's like, you need to stop being so soft. You need to stop thinking about velocity. You need to stop thinking about throwing against some hitter that's going to be drafted in the first round and having to get him out. You need to compete, and you need to hate everyone you throw against and dominate everybody you throw against, whatever. And so he sat me down, and after that, I went on a crazy run that like I ended the year at a 3 or whatever it was. And I remember the time I got drafted was the Cubs in the second round, but they had seen me throw in the SEC tournament, and they watched me throw, and Theo Epstein told me himself, he drafted me because of how I was on the mound, not because of anything I did, no result, nothing. He said, you grabbed the ball, you went after him. He's like, you got in a yelling match with Hunter Renfroe. He's like, you hated the other team and you wanted to win so bad. He's like, that's all we want for the Cubs. And they drafted me off that one performance.
Wow.
But nothing related to how many innings I went, how many strikeouts, nothing. They're like, we just like the person that you are and how you carry yourself on the mound. And that was all Matt Hobbs.
Wow. Throughout your junior season, had you had any teams? I'm kind of unfamiliar with the process, but I've heard stories from guys who have been drafted that they fill out like questionnaires and people will reach out to them and they'll have conversations throughout the year. Did that happen at all for you that junior season?
Yeah. So they have, back in the day, I don't know how it is now, I'm so far removed from it. They had like a top 200s thing. And like, if you were a top 200 prospect or 300, I can't remember what number it was, like you had to fill these questionnaires out and teams would come talk to you. I don't know if they even do that anymore, but I'll never forget the Yankees they sent like 3 people. I filled out like these 250 question tests and all these things. And I was like, okay, I'm for sure going to go to the Yankees, right? Like I had 3 different meetings with them. It was nuts. And the Cubs, they sent a guy named Ty Nichols, who I still talk to. He actually texted me last week now that I'm back on the Cubs. He showed up and we go sit in the press box and he's got this 300 question test and he puts it in front of me and he's like, you have an hour, go. And so I answered the first 3 questions and he takes the test away from me. He's like, I just wanted to see if you were going to do it. He's like, we already like you. See you later. And he walked off. And I was like, Cubs aren't going to draft me. I was like, that guy, he didn't even talk to me at all. He just wanted to make sure that I would do the questionnaire. And once I did that, I checked his box and that was it.
Wow. So where were you when you ended up being drafted?
I was at my house with my dad and I went to a workout with the Giants. They had pick 24 and then the Yankees they had like pick 30, 34 and 36 or something. They had like 3 picks in there. One of them was Aaron Judge. So they did not miss the pick. They had 3 picks, and I remember I was probably going there. And then if not there, the Astros had picked 40, and then that's all I had heard. And so the Giants took somebody else. They took another left-handed pitcher. The Yankees took a lefty high school kid. And so once they took him, my agent was like, probably not going to be you. They're probably not going to go 2 lefty arms with these 3 picks here. And so once that happened, I remember I looked at my dad, and I was like, this is excruciating. I was like, I don't want to sit here and wait any longer. So we ended up watching Game of Thrones. we watched like half an episode of Game of Thrones, and my agent was like, Cubs 41. And I turn on the TV, and as we turn on the TV, Kerry Wood's walking out, and he's like, Rob Zastryzny. And I was like, there it is. I'm on the Cubs. And I thought that was cool. And like I said, I talked to Theo shortly after, and I'll never forget this. They called me, and they were like negotiating with my agent, signing bonus stuff. And my strategy was like, be very signable. Like, whatever you guys think is fair, I'll fly out to Arizona the next day. And they're like, well, that's not necessary. Like, we'll negotiate. And so they sent us an offer. We're like, perfect, that's fair. We accepted it. So I texted the travel guy. I was like, fly me out to Arizona. And they're like, well, don't you want to go to Chicago? And I was like, no, I'm not going to go to Chicago. Like, I'm going to go play. Because I thought going to Chicago to sign a piece of paper was worthless. I was like, I'm going to go to Arizona, sign the same piece of paper, and get ready and get after it. And so I get to Arizona, and I remember the assistant GM talked to me. He's like, you're the only guy I'd ever turned down going to sign at Wrigley Field. And I was like, man, I didn't know I was going to go sign at Wrigley Field. I thought I was flying into Chicago, going to go meet someone in an office, sign a paper, and then fly to Arizona. And so I just was so excited to get my pro ball career started that I was like, no, I don't need any to hold my jersey, put my jersey on. I was like, just get me to Arizona. I'm ready to go.
So was it just your dad and yourself there when you find out you were drafted?
My mom was there too, but she was nervous cooking in the kitchen.
Okay.
Yeah, she was stressed out. My dad was, but he was playing cool like he always does. And I had my phone, and then I'll never forget this. I had my phone. It had 50% battery, and my dad was like, charge it just in case, you don't want to miss a phone call from your agent, whatever. And I was like, nah, 50% battery, no big deal. So I get drafted, and my phone's blowing up. I hug my dad. I go hug my mom, and I go grab my phone, and notifications going crazy. People tweeting at me, texting me, whatever. My phone died. And so everyone, the Cubs were trying to get a hold of me. My phone was dead. So it's on the charger. I'm panicking and waiting for this thing to charge back up. And every time I take it off the charger, it dies again because people are texting me. So it was just one of those where it's it was one of the coolest days of my life because my dream to go get drafted and everything like that, but also the love that I got and support from everyone in my life was really cool.
Yeah. Was Wyatt around?
Yeah, Wyatt was around. I can't remember where he was at, but I saw him the next morning.
Okay.
But yeah, the draft was later at night, and I remember my agent was like, do you want to have a get together? We can put a camera up or we can do whatever. And I was like, no. I was like, what if I don't get drafted? And he was like, you don't have to worry about not getting drafted. He's like, but I was kind of on the fringe of going day one or not. Yeah. And it was just one of those where I didn't want to have everyone sitting around, and then I ended up going on day two. Yeah. And just being like, all right, guys, you can go home. I didn't want to do that. So it was just, I kept it as small as possible. But yeah, I called Wyatt right after, and then I saw him the next morning, and we celebrated. Did he tell you, congrats, man, but you need to go get better? Pretty much, yeah. He was like, I don't know what you're so happy about. You're not in the big leagues. I was like, oh, okay. That's just how he is. Okay, sweet. So you get out to Arizona, and you sign, you're good to go. Do you play, is it a short season out there? Yeah, so I went to Arizona to sign. I played a week and a half in that league, and then I went to Boise, which was our short season team. Okay. Went there for 3 starts, and then they sent me to Low A for 2 starts just to meet everybody, see what a full season of affiliated ball looks like. And they wanted to get me on a 5-day routine, because back then, now guys throw on the 6th day and there's an off day every Monday in the minor leagues. Back then you played every day, 2 off days every other month. It was insane. And so they wanted to get me on the 5-day for about 5 starts, and then to start me ready for next year. Okay. Gotcha. What was that like? Obviously you probably felt a little more confident than maybe if you had been drafted directly out of high school and you're 18, 19, trying to figure out how to play with grown men. Yeah. What was that like for you? It was good. I feel like enough people I'd played against in college had gone to low A, high A, double A, or played with. And I was like, okay, I can do this. I can play with those guys. I can play at this level. And then it's I'm kind of, in short season, I was older than most of the kids there. And so I had some success, and I got to low A, and it was closer to my age, and I had some success. But starting out in high school, it's you go from playing high school kids, which high school competition's fine. Especially if you go up north in Dallas and Austin, and here in Corpus, it's incredible. But you just don't know. And so there's always that unsure. I listened to you talk to Wyatt, and Wyatt was I didn't know how to lose. Oh yeah. And he was like, we lost our 3rd game, and I was mad. And it's I went to college where we lost 35 games, and it's I learned how to not learn how to lose, but learned how to move on from a loss. I learned how to have a failure and move on from it. Whereas in high school, I had like a couple failures. I'd go 6 innings and give up 2 runs and we'd lose or whatever. But in college, you'd have like 2 innings, 7 runs, give up 3 homers, see you in a week. And like you're sitting on your couch alone and you're like, what do I do? And so I learned how to fail and still move forward. And that was the biggest thing with college was you learn a workout routine and you learn how to like succeed and fail. Because in high school, you're supposed to succeed. Like Calallen's standard is crazy high. And so we'd lose and we'd get reamed out behind the mound by Coach Chapman, but that was it. And it was like we'd go home and then we'd go to school the next day and I had a math test. Whereas college, like we'd lose and we'd show up to practice the next day and we'd still be in a bad mood. And I'd be like, oh, this is serious too. Like this is very heavy. And like guys would be bad for a week and they'd get benched. Like if Wyatt had a bad week at Calallen, he'd be like, you're still going to hit third. You're still going to be our 2 pitcher, whatever it is. But in college, like I'd see guys like freshmen would get an opportunity, make an error, and they wouldn't play for 2 weeks. And it's like it became like very businessy and like very serious. And like I learned how to like take that pressure and like offload it and like learn how to play through that pressure.
So after that, I guess immediate few months after you sign with the Cubs and you're drafted, where do you spend your first off season? You spend it here back here at home, or do you spend it in Arizona?
I was back here, correct? Yeah, I came back here. I'm talking to my wife over here because that's when we started to talk and hang out a little bit again. But yeah, I came back here. I ended up going to Sam Houston where she was in school, and I went and visited her. And I trained I don't remember who I trained or where I trained here, but I worked out at like Gold's Gym. I remember that. And then the Cubs did a good job. We had a November and a January camp and instruct. So November, January, and February, you had something to do. So I'd come back here for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and then I'd leave again. I'd come back here for 2 weeks, I'd leave again. And that's kind of how I did my off seasons for the first little bit. And now I'm still in Arizona with my wife now, and I train out at Push Performance, which is my favorite gym in the world. And it's got like 25, 30 big leaguers at it, a bunch of like young guys in the minor leagues getting after it. And like, that's what I should have been doing the whole time. But I just did what the organization told me. I was like, okay, I need to come to this camp and I need to do this. And then you get old enough and you're like, I'm going to do what's best for me. And you find a place that fits that. And now that's what I do. So
after that first off season, you report for spring training. Where do you spend that first full season of pro ball?
I went to high A.
Okay.
And I was very bad.
Where was high A at the time?
I was in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Okay.
And I was still kind of doing what baseball was my life. And so like I would go to bed as soon as I got home. I would have a great diet. I would eat whatever we had at the field. I'd go home, I'd go to sleep, I'd wake up, I'd be the first one at the field. And I made baseball my life. And then I failed like miserably. I was exhausted. My body hurt because I'm working out too much. I'm putting too much stress on it. I'm at the field. I'm shagging BP too hard. Like I'm doing all these, I'm making all these mistakes because I'm trying to be the hardest working guy on the team. And I learned pretty quickly after that from some of the guys there, a guy named Albert Almora and guys like that who had been there a while. Were like, hey, like work hard, but work hard in these little windows. He was like, from 2 to 4, you have throwing program at 3. It's like from 2, get after it. Start stretching, start moving around. 3, get after it, throw. And then 4, get after your recovery. And he's like, then shut it down, watch TV, get on your phone, call your girlfriend, whatever you got to do, separate. And then I learned how to separate. And then marrying my wife, thankfully, has helped a ton because she's like, once the game's over, if I want to like be upset or I want to be happy, she gives me a little bit. And then she's like, all right, we're going to go grab food or we're going to watch a movie and then we're going to go grab breakfast tomorrow morning. And like separating baseball from my life, because if baseball becomes your life, you ride so high and low with it.
Yeah. When did y'all get married?
Cut this part out. November 30th, 2018. I thought of that all on my own. You can edit that, right?
I can. So, okay. So then that first full season of pro ball is what, 2015, 2014?
Yeah.
Okay.
2014 was my first year. Then I went to AA in 2015. Did okay, but I got hit with a comebacker, broke my ankle.
Oh.
Yeah, I should have got out of the way, but I tried to be a hockey goalie for some reason. And I got hit with a comebacker, broke my ankle, went to Arizona and rehabbed for like 8 weeks, and then they brought me back. And I remember they sat me down and they're like, it's going to hurt, but you have to get to like 90 innings because next year, like, you have a chance of making the big leagues, and you can't do it if you throw 40 innings this year. Because then, like for health reasons, like I'd probably only be good for about 75, 80 innings the next year. You can't go from 0 innings to 200 innings. It just doesn't help. So they're like, just go out there and get as many innings as you can. So I went out there. I struggled a bit. I think I had like a 4.5 ERA, 5 ERA, and I was just, velo was down. My ankle hurt. I couldn't really cover first very well. And anytime someone would bunt, I was like the end of the world for me. So I did okay that year. They sent me back to AA the next year, and I was fully healthy, fully ready to go. And that was the year I made it all the way up to the big leagues.
Okay. And the Cubs AA team is where?
Tennessee Smokies.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. It's gonna be
very cool area.
What city is that in?
That's in it's Knoxville. I can't remember it's like a little sub city. Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
Okay.
It's but pretty much Knoxville is where we lived.
Cool.
And nice area. Like you go west from the field or north, can't remember. You go up into the mountains. You go east. You go to Knoxville, which is a college town. It was a great area, great setup. And I remember that year we had a pre-season meeting with the AA team. It was like this little banquet thing. They had food. They had some boosters there and stuff. And the guy was like, hey, this Cubs team, the guy at the MC was like, this Cubs team's going to win a World Series this year. Like, we got the guys, we got the right guys in place. And he's like, and somebody from this team is going to be on that team. And I remember when he said that, it like clicked in my head. I was like, man, I am so close. I was like, my team is ready to go. Like, they're in the playoffs. Last year, they won the wild card game against Pittsburgh. I was like, I want to be a part of that team so bad. And that was the year I was like, it has to be me. I have to be the guy who made it. It ended up being a couple of us, but I ended up making up that year. But yeah, that guy, I'll never forget. He just said it. And like, that was the first time it clicked in my head. I was like, I am so close to the big leagues. Like all this work I put in, I am a phone call away is what they say. And I ended up going to AAA for a little bit and then going up.
And where was the AAA team?
Iowa Cubs. Another great city, Des Moines, Iowa.
Cool.
I love it. And you walk to the field every day. That's my go-to. If you're on a road trip in the minor leagues or in the big leagues and you can walk to the field, I think that's the greatest thing in the world.
That's nice.
It's awesome.
So you go to AAA and then you get that phone call. Is that right?
Yeah.
So do you remember what you were doing? How did that play out?
Yeah, I was starting that day in Sacramento, actually.
Okay.
And I remember I showed up to the field and everybody on your start day, like depending on who you are, like Max Scherzer, I played with him. He's a Mizzou guy as well. He walks around, nobody talks to him. And he lays out his jersey. He does the same thing every day, and that's why he's one of the greats. He's super consistent. My start day, I was like, I'm going to relax until 2 hours before. So every time I showed up, I'd play games in the clubhouse. I'd BS with guys, play ping pong, whatever it was. And then 2 hours before, I'd lock it in. But when I showed up, none of the coaching staff was like talking to me at all. And I was like, all right, whatever, it doesn't matter. And then a guy rolls into the clubhouse with his bags, and his name is Josh Colementor. He pitched in the big leagues forever. And I was like, hey, man, good to see you. Like, introduced myself to him. And he was like, oh, nice. I'm Josh. I'm starting today. And I was like, no, you're not. I am starting today. And as soon as he said that to me, one of the coaches like overheard and popped his head out. And they were like, Rob. And I came in. I was like, oh, no. And I was throwing well at the time. So I was like, probably a good thing. But there's also a chance it was kind of closer to the end of the season that they're going to shut me down. I was already at like 110 innings.
Okay.
So I thought they're going to maybe like, hey, we're going to skip a start. We're going to keep you at about 120, 125. And so I was like, okay, they're probably skipping my start. And I walked in and there's this guy, Jared Madsen there, who he's still with the Cubs now, but he was like the farm director. Mm-hmm. And when I saw him, I was like, okay, he usually delivers the bad news. And I was like, not good. So I sat down and he was like, what are you doing today? I was like, I'm starting. And he was like, you're not. He's like, but you are going to pitch tomorrow. And I was like, oh, great. I was like, okay, like, why am I being pushed back a day? He's like, well, because you're pitching tomorrow in Colorado, you're going to the big leagues. And I remember from that moment on, I thanked everybody, but I blanked out because I was like, I have to call Natalie and tell her. I was like, I don't know what it was. I was like, I have to call Natalie, like, whatever. So I called her and can't remember what you said, but I was like, I'm pitching tomorrow in Colorado. And she was like, what's that mean? I was like, yeah, she was in college at the time.
So I had to pay for my bills. And he was like, what are you doing tomorrow? It's like, it's opening week in college. I have to work. I told you that. I was like, we'll come to Colorado. I was like, I can't. I have to work. And he was like, well, I'll be in Denver. I was like, and what about it? And he wouldn't get to the point. He was like, I'm in the big leagues. I was like, what's the big league?
Yeah, my wife had no idea what the big leagues was because when I got called up from AA to AAA, she was in Tennessee with me. And I was like, Natalie, I'm going to AAA. This is a huge deal. Like, I'm super excited. And she's like, I just got here. Can you just tell me you want to go next week? And I was like, no, I cannot do that. And so when I called her and told her I was going to the big leagues, it cracks me up now because now she's a baseball wizard. Like, she's like, oh, like so-and-so threw a bunch of innings today. He has options. He's probably going down. You think they'll bring up this guy? And I'm like, okay.
You're like,
when did you become
who?
a general manager here? But so I called her. I was like, hey, come to Colorado. Like I was like kind of like playing at it. Like you need to come to Colorado. Like I'm playing in Colorado tomorrow. And she was like, what? I was like, Natalie, I just got called up to the big leagues. And she was like, Rob, I have work. And I was like, no, I know you do. I was like, you got to tell them you can't come in. I was like, you got to jump on the next flight out. And so she had to scramble and find flights, and she ended up making it. And then this is one of my favorite stories to tell. I'm like nervous. I'm like all sorts of like, I'm not nervous to pitch. Like I know I can handle it. I've thrown at the AAA level. I've thrown well against a bunch of ex-big leaguers and like current up and down guys.
Mm-hmm.
What I was nervous about was like I didn't know any of my teammates, and the Cubs were riddled with superstars.
Mm-hmm.
Like I never went to big league camp, nothing. So I knew CJ Edwards was on the team, Albert Almora I think was up at the time, and Chris Bryan I'd played with a little bit. And so I didn't know anybody. So I was like super nervous about going to the hotel. Like if I wore the right thing to the field, what bus should I get on? Like there's all these things that you have to be concerned about. And so I'm in the hotel, like pacing back and forth. Like the bus is at 2. Should I take an Uber to the field? I had heard that I need to get there before the veterans do. And Natalie shows up, and she's like she's been in the big leagues for 30 years. She gives her bag to the bellboy, and she's like, room 1483, and gets in the elevator and comes up. So I open the door for her, no bags. I'm like, dude, where are your bags? She's like, bellboy's bringing them up. And I was like, okay, we're at the Four Seasons. She's never been in anything other than like a Radisson or whatever, and she's just makes herself at home. She takes a tour of the place. There's a TV in the mirror in the bathroom, and she goes, okay, I'm going to take a bath later and watch some TV. And I was like, God, okay. And so I sit down, I'm about to go, I'm like staring out the window, and I'm just like nervous. And I hear the phone, like she's like clicking the phone. And I like look, I'm like, are you making a phone call right now? And she's like, yeah, I'm ordering room service. I'm hungry. And I was like, okay. So she became a show wife immediately. But yeah, it took me a little bit longer than her to like feel comfortable in the big leagues. But yeah, I'll never forget that.
That's so funny. So then, okay, so from Sacramento, because you were in Sacramento, right?
Yeah.
You're saying? So from Sacramento to Colorado, how quickly after they tell you you're pitching tomorrow, but in Colorado, how quickly do things move? Is it you call Natalie, and then after that, you get your bags, you get on a plane, you're in Denver? How does that unfold?
So they told me at about 2:00,
Okay.
and they were like, your flight's at 6 a.m. to go to Colorado. Fortunately, we're pretty close. Sacramento to Denver's not too long of a flight. So they're like, you can go home, you can do anything. They're like, who have you called? This was about an hour after they told me. I was like, I called my wife and I called my parents. She's like, recall them and tell them to not tell anyone because we have to make a roster move up top. And so I was like, okay. And they're like, we'll let you know when you can start telling people. I was like, okay, great. So I go sit at the hotel in Sacramento. I order a pizza. Me and another guy got called up. His name was Felix Pena. We got called up on the same day. And so I went to his room and I was like, what do we wear? What do we do this? And he's this big Dominican guy. He's like, Poppy, chill out. We're big leaguers now. We do what we want. I was like, okay, great. And so they called me at about 9 p.m. It was like right as the Cubs game ended. And they were like, okay, we've informed the guy. You can start telling people. And that's when I started like letting it go. And rumors were going around because I'd been pulled from my start. And so like people were like, hey, are you going up to the big leagues? Like guys in AAA had called guys in AA and be like, hey, Rob's going up. So I was like telling them, I'm not sure. Like, I don't know, like trying to keep it as low key as possible. But from 2 to 9, and then I was at about 9 p.m. I was like, okay, if I go to sleep now, I'll get 8 hours of sleep. And I laid in my bed from about 9 to 3 in the morning, just staring at the ceiling. And I was like, not going to get any sleep. I think I got about an hour and a half, jumped on a flight the next morning at about 6 a.m. and met the team, 2:00 bus. Natalie ordered room service at 1:30, and I was a big leaguer.
Were the veteran guys on the Cubs, were they pretty cool? Were they?
They were the best.
Okay.
They were, and that was why that team was so good. Like looking back, like we beat a lot of people, and we beat them like often, but we weren't like team wise the best team in the world. But I thought we were because everyone played so cohesively, right? We had Chris Bryant was in the middle of like a rookie of the year MVP type of season. Jake Arrieta was on the cusp of winning a Cy Young, and John Lester was John Lester. And I rolled into the clubhouse, and my locker was, don't know why, my locker was between John Lester and Aroldis Chapman. And so I look and I see, I'm like, what number am I? They're like, you're number 29. And I was like, okay, great. And I look and I see number 29 jersey hanging up. And I look to the left and I see Lester, and right I see Chapman. And I was like, why? And so I sit down and I'm just sitting there, and I like introduce myself to everybody. And John Lester's like, you nervous? And I was like, a little bit. And he's like, good. That was the only thing he said to me for like a month. And that team was just, they were all about going about their business, picking each other up. Nobody was above anybody else. Like Chris Bryant would bunt. Like Javi Baez would bat eighth, or he'd bat leadoff. He'd play short. They'd move him to left field. Wilson Contreras would catch, and then some days they'd put him out in right field. Like everybody, just all they wanted to do was play and win.
Yeah.
And that was the most fun I ever had playing. It was just guys who nobody had a role in the bullpen. Like Chapman was our closer, and everybody else was like, "Hey, let's just get the ball to Chapman." And it was a team that just wanted to win so bad for that city. And then obviously we did. But I've said this, and now that I'm back with the Cubs, it's going to sound a little different. But I always said Cubs fans are the best fans in baseball. They're the most loving, diehard fans in the world. They cheer for you when you're doing good. They'll let you know when you're doing bad, but they'll never be super negative. Like they'll never just be like, "Hey, like quit baseball, you're terrible." They'll be like, "Hey, figure it out." Like, they're just very good fans. And everywhere I've been, there's been great fans, and I've had fun, and I've enjoyed all my stops, but I've never once ever said that another fan base was better than Chicago, because till the day I die, I think the Cubs fan base is the best fan base in baseball.
That's awesome. So how did your first start go?
First start was in Pittsburgh, and it was the first time in history that a guy made his first career start and the game ended in a tie.
Okay.
It was a 1-1 tie in the fifth inning with a rain out. Yeah.
Did you? So I guess then from your debut, or when you get called up to that Colorado game, did you not start that game?
No, I threw it to the bullpen. So
Okay.
they had a long reliever have to move to the rotation, and they had another guy who was kind of banged up. So they put one on the IL and they moved the other guy to the fifth starter. And they're like, "Hey, we have like multiple innings in the pen available. Like you're probably going to throw long relief." And so I ended up throwing the 10th inning in my debut. It was like sleeting rain in Colorado. It was like 40 degrees. And I threw against the top of their lineup, loaded the bases, got out of it. And I think we ended up losing the game in the 12th, but I threw the 10th inning, and then I threw like 2 2/3 two days later against Colorado. Then I threw 3 innings against, like, I was just kind of the long relief guy.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the year, we had clinched a couple weeks prior. They're like, "Hey, you're going to start and just go until we take you out of the game." And so I threw against Pittsburgh, went I think 4 innings or 3 2/3, and they came and took me out of the game. And it was a 1-1 tie in the fifth. Rain came, and they just called it a tie. So we ended that year like 103-50-1 or whatever it was. Like just a really weird stat.
And so when you got called up, did they tell you, "We don't know how long you'll be with the big league club," or did they know like you're going to be up there for a few weeks? How did that? Because did you end up staying with the club the rest of the season?
Yeah, so they told me initially, so I got up on August 16th or 17th, and September call-ups was the whole 40-man roster. Like you can bring anybody you wanted. And so they're like, "We need you really badly for 2 weeks." And they're like, "After that, whatever." And so I remember sitting in the pen, and Travis Wood was sitting with me. He's like, "Congrats, dude. You're going to get the rest of the year with us." And I was like, "No, I only have 2 weeks." He's like, "No, you have 2 weeks until September 1st, and then we can bring up whoever we want." And now I think you can bring up like 1 bat and 1 glove now, and 1 arm. So it's like very limited now. But back then you could bring up anyone on the 40-man roster. Like the dugouts used to be like a spring training dugout. It used to be like 50 guys just sitting there cheering on the team. It's crazy. But yeah, I ended up being there the rest of the year. They took me off the roster for the NLDS against the Giants. The Giants had a ton of righties. And they sent me back to Arizona with Trevor Cahill and Jason Hamill. And they're like, "You guys are going to throw a simulated game and come back." And so we all, like, they're veteran guys. Both of them are 10-year big leaguers, and I just got there. And they're like, "Rob, this is what's going to happen. If we face the Nationals, it's probably going to be me or Trevor. If we face the Dodgers, it'll be you." And I was like, "Are you serious?" And they're like, "Yeah, they're going to put you on the roster if we face the Dodgers." And so I was like, "Okay, great." And we played our sim game. We ended up beating the Giants in game 4, I believe, game 4. And the Giants and the Nationals went to game 7. Or game 5, sorry, DS, game 5. And it was the game Kershaw came out of the pen and closed out against the Nationals to send him to the DS or the CS. And I remember sitting there watching that game, and I was like, my entire future is like on the line in this game. I was like, if the Dodgers win this game, I'm on the roster. Like I'm in the playoffs. And if the Nationals win, I either go home or I have to sit on the bench. And so when the Dodgers won, I was fired up, and I got a phone call like 8 minutes after the game ended, and they're like, "Are you ready to go?" And I was like, "Yeah." They're like, "You're on the roster, see you tomorrow." And I was like, yes.
So did y'all have home field advantage in that next series?
Yeah, we did.
So you just go right back to Chicago?
Yeah, I went right to Chicago, and then I was on the CS roster, warmed up a ton. They never put me in the game, but I 100% blame Aroldis Chapman for that because he threw every single game for multiple innings. He was an absolute superstar for us. But they'd warm me up. They'd be like, get Rob going, and then they'd be like, also get Chapman going. And he was the better choice at the time.
I guess at this point, are you kind of just in awe? Like, here I am, a month and a half ago, I was in AAA, and here we are in the NLCS, and then you guys win. Oh, I'm in the World Series, and a month and a half ago, I was in Sacramento playing at the AAA level.
Yeah, it just all happened so fast, and like I did a pretty good job at like taking it day to day, and it's like all the guys in the clubhouse did. Like, if we would have understood the gravity of the situation, like all of Chicago was like praying for this World Series, and like there's people posting stuff. Natalie saw all this stuff, and like thankfully she didn't send any of it to me, but it's like, my grandpa's been a Cubs fan for 92 years. He has stage 4 cancer, and like this is his last year. And I'm like, oh no,
Gotta win for this man.
Yeah, I was like, please, I hope that doesn't come down to me. But it was just such a big moment. But those guys were so, like, Anthony Rizzo specifically was like, I remember we were down 3-1, and he was in his sliding shorts, and he was running around to the Rocky theme, like doing like Rocky stuff, and then he put a hood up, and he was like climbing the stairs of. He was just like kept us in it. Like he made it so much more of like a, this is us. Like, don't worry about any of that outside. Don't worry about the Cleveland Indians. Don't worry about anything. Like, we are the Chicago Cubs. That's all we're going to focus on.
Yeah,
it was special.
So when you guys clinch the pennant, and like, when does it set in? Oh, I'm going to be playing in the World Series. Like, what was that like for you?
It was during the clinching party. They had like a little speech before we popped bottles and everything, and they're like, it is hard to get to the World Series. And they started going around the room. They're like, how many World Series you been to? And Lester was like, 2, and 0. This is my first. And I was looking around. I was like, this is very rare. Like, there's like a few guys who had ever been there. Ben Zobrist had been there a couple times, but everyone else was like, this is my first. Like, I've never been to a World Series. And I was like, this is my first year in pro ball, like in the big leagues, and we're going to a World Series. And that's when I was like, this is unbelievable. So it definitely, like, I'm glad I didn't realize it at the time, but like, I remember Wyatt flew up and helped me drive home because I had all my stuff there. And so me and Wyatt drove home, and I remember I sat the first like 6 hours in silence. It was just after the parade. It was just after everything. And he was like, you okay? And I was like, what just happened? And he was like, dude, I don't know.
You guys beat Cleveland in 7 games, right?
Yeah.
In the
7.
World Series. Did you get to pitch at all in that series?
No.
Okay.
I was in the dugout for that whole series. I was in the bullpen for the CS.
Okay.
And I was just kind of like, if the game got out of hand, I would finish the game for the guys. Like, I would just, I'd be the arm to eat it. So we saved the bullpen, and we just played every game so tough, especially with the Dodgers. Every game was a 1 or 2 run game going into the 8th inning. There's so many go-ahead homers and go-ahead RBIs in like the 8th inning, and it was like, okay, Rob's going to throw if we're losing in the 8th, and then we'd hit a 2-run homer, and Chapman would go close the game. It'd be like, okay, Rob's going to clean this up, and we'd hit a 3-run homer and tie it, and they'd be like, sit Rob down. And so it's just, we were never ever out of any game. In the World Series, the NLDS, the NLCS, and it was like every game was a 1 or 2 run game, and those leverage guys carried us. Like, they threw Rondon, Strope, Chapman, all those guys, Justin Grimm, CJ Edwards. They threw every single day, and it was impressive to watch.
Yeah, that's incredible. So just probably the busiest and craziest, 3 months, 4 months of your life probably?
Yeah, it was nuts. And the playoffs, it's like the season ends, and it's a very long season for these guys. They've been playing all year. Like, Arrieta's at 180 innings. John Lester's at 180 innings. And then you have the playoffs, and the playoffs we went 4 games, 6 games, 7 games. So the playoffs are another month. And like, these guys are just like, watching these guys go about their business. I was like, okay, this is a whole nother level. And like, that experience was great because like the World Series, I have a World Series ring and everything. I got to experience it with, like, my wife was there for a lot of it. And like, but really, like, I learned so much from watching those guys go about their business. Like, they were all beat up. They'd all thrown so much, and they were all just like, what do we need to do to be ready for the next one? What do we need to do to be ready for the DS, the CS, the World Series? And like, watching those guys who have been around for 10 years and done it, you realize that, like, it's not a coincidence that they've been so good for so long. Like, they put in the work. Like, they are so consistent with their routines. Like, they got on the same bus to go to the field every day. They were in the weight room at 3:30 every day. It was just so consistent. And I realized, I was like, okay, there's a whole new level of this stuff that I need to make sure that I'm doing.
Yeah. What was it? What was the travel like? Even now, having played in the big leagues for the last several years and being with these big league clubs, how much of a step up is the travel from AAA and the minor league days to now you guys are traveling private, and Natalie's been in the bigs 30 years, it seems like, right?
Yeah.
Bellboy's got the luggage, right? What is that like, just the disparity? What's your favorite thing about the big league travel and the meals, the catering, stuff like that?
It is 5-star class treatment everywhere you go. You go from a very nice hotel to the best clubhouse you've ever seen to the nicest plane you've ever been on. Like, bus pulls up to the flight, you walk off the bus onto the plane, the door shuts, you're up in the air in 30 minutes. It's a direct flight everywhere you go, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't have to okay, we got to navigate around this airport, or oh, there's some weather. Like, they fly right through everything. It's like 2 hours to 4 hours max. And they have meals on the flight. She's been on a couple, and same thing. She's like, I'll take this. I'll order this. Can you give me a side of it? I'm like, Natalie, chill out. But she just hey, it's available. She's gonna have it. But the treatment's so funny, and it's also pretty funny because she comes to a lot of road games. She's crossed off how many stadiums now? Yeah, she's crossed off over half the stadiums in the MLB to come watch me play, and she's got to make flight arrangements. She's got to drive the dog. She's got to travel. And I'm like, oh, Natalie, I'm sore. I'm tired. Our flight was 3 hours yesterday, and she's like, I just drove 16 hours to be here. Shut up.
I don't want to hear it.
Yeah. But yeah, it's very nice. The beds are super comfortable. The diets and the nutrition has gotten so much better from even when I first got to the big leagues. Now it's you have the exact macro count that you need. You have everything. They have meals for everybody. It used to be here's grilled chicken, enjoy it. Now they'll have a menu of 12 items, and the chef can cook any of this up for you, whatever you want. And it's a well-oiled machine. I walk in at 4 right after BP. I'm like, hey, I'm going to want a chicken quesadilla with a side of rice ready at 4:15. I'm going to go shower. And I come in, and the guy, as soon as I walk in at 4:15, he's
Wow.
it's perfectly done. They do such a good job. And I don't know, it sounds bad to say it, I feel but guys deserve it up there. You've trained your whole life. You've worked so hard to get to that point, and it's so hard to be an MLB player, especially now. The talent has gone through the roof, and you kind of deserve it. You deserve the 5-star treatment. You deserve all this stuff because it doesn't last forever.
Yeah, exactly. Such a small group of guys. I think I agree. I think it's very well earned. I think it's deserved. So I love that. I love hearing about the details of the treatment, the travel, and all that stuff. It's cool. And on top of that, you're probably getting the largest paychecks throughout a season you've ever seen. You probably get it, and you're like, what do I do with all this? Wow.
Yeah, no, it's super nice, and it's so counterintuitive sometimes because the minor league is such a grind. It's such a hard thing, and I make good money in AAA because I've been around for so long, and you get these free agent contracts, and it's nice. But you see these guys making 30, 45,000, working just as hard as the guys in the MLB are.
Yeah,
and then those same guys go to the MLB, and their salary goes 20 times.
Yep,
and it's I'm so happy for those guys. It's I used to. In my younger years, someone would get called up from another team, and I'd be like, man, I'm just as good as that guy. Why am I not in the big leagues? Just a horrible mindset. And now it's you realize how hard it is. So anytime someone's in the big leagues, you're good for him. I hope he stays up there forever. I hope everybody gets their paycheck. Some guy wins an arbitration case and gets 5.8 million instead of 5.6. It's good. He deserves every bit of that contract.
Yeah.
He's put in so much work to get there. I used to say I'd play for league minimum forever. I was baseball's the greatest. I play for league minimum forever. And then you realize how hard it is. It's you get a family and you're I'd like to make a little bit more.
Yeah.
I want to go to arbitration. I want to get that free agent deal now.
Yeah.
It just changes quickly.
Yeah. Okay. So then from the Cubs,
yeah,
you spend 2 seasons with them?
So I was with the Cubs in the big leagues in 16, parts of 17, parts of 18.
Okay.
And then in 19, I wasn't throwing very well. I was kind of a shell of myself. I was trying new things. I was trying to be a lefty specialist because that's what was going to get me to the big leagues. And then they banned the lefty specialists. They're 3-batter minimum, no more lefty specialists. And so I was kind of out of a job. And so the Cubs came to me and they're it's going to take some work. You're not the guy you used to be. And I was okay, what do you need me to do? And they're you need to put the effort in. You need to get more directional. You need to get your velo back up. You need to do some of these things. And they're unfortunately, you're not going to do it with us in the big leagues. We're going to have you do it in AAA. And I was okay, no big deal. And then one of the pitching coordinators there was I don't think he's going to be able to do it. And once he told me that, I went up to Theo's office and I was like, Theo, get rid of me. If you guys don't think I can do this, like, no problem. Like, this is my own fault, but let me go somewhere they can fix me. And he was like, give me a couple hours. And sure enough, later he traded me to the Dodgers.
Wow.
And like, he always did right by me. He's one of the best GMs in history for a reason. But he was like, go to the Dodgers, fix yourself. And that year in OKC was horrible. Like, I was not good that year. And it was like, I was fighting my body. I was like trying to be cross-body, but I needed to be more directional. And it was just this huge learning curve. And it was hours at the field of working on like monotonous things. And I credit the Dodgers a lot because they knew exactly what I needed to be. And they were like, you're going to fail, but you're going to do it the right way. And after that year, 2020, I signed with the Orioles. And from then on out, I've been who I am.
Yeah.
And I've had a lot of success after that. But it was Theo being like, hey, we don't know if we can fix you, but I think I know a team that can. And he traded me to the Dodgers. And then it's all come full circle now that I'm back with the Cubs.
And so that year, that stint with the Dodgers was 2019?
Yeah.
And did you play with the Dodgers at all? Just Oklahoma City?
Oklahoma City the whole year. Then the next year was COVID year. I was with the Orioles, and it was looking like I might break with the team, maybe go to AAA for a little bit. And then COVID happened. They brought me to the alt site. And then one of the first games at the alt site, I actually fractured my elbow.
Okay.
And so I was throwing well, and it looked like I was going to be a big part of that team. They weren't that good at the time. And so they were like, he's a young guy. Like, he's got options left. Like, let's keep him around.
Yeah.
Then I fractured my elbow. And so they offered to bring me back on another deal the next year, but I wanted to go somewhere else. I was like, my elbow hurts. And they were like, you're going to have to rehab. And so the Marlins were like, we'll take you. You'll go to AAA and we'll let you pitch, because the Orioles wanted to rehab me. And I was like, no, I need to get back on the mound. And so I went to the Marlins that year, whole year in AAA. The Mets the next year, 2022. Yeah, Marlins Mets.
I think that's right.
Yeah, so Marlins, and then I signed with the Mets, and I threw well, but they were a 100-win team, and they were like, "Hey," and they told me pretty early, they're like, "Keep doing your thing, but we don't really need you." And I was like, "This is like, I'm like now 28 years old, and I haven't been back in the big leagues in 3 years." I was like, "This is horrible." So I threw well enough to get to the big leagues with the Mets. Went to Philly. She came back out. It was my first time pitching in the big leagues in about 3 years, but I'd had about a year and a half of like really good success. And I was like, dude, like, why aren't they using me? Why aren't they whatever? So they DFA me. I threw well. I threw once there, I think.
With the Mets?
Yeah, and they DFA'd me, and the Angels picked me up. And I actually credit the Angels for the rest of my success, because the Angels, they didn't teach me anything mechanically. They just threw me out in the bullpen, and they're like, go to work. And at the end of the year, they were like, it's going to sound awful, but it's true. They're like, you're a big leaguer. Like, you are a big league guy trapped in a minor league body. They're like, you are just a minor leaguer up here. He's like, and that's how you pitch. Like, you're not good enough. You're timid. You're not attacking hitters. Like, you are on paper one of the best left-handed pitchers in baseball, like left-handed relievers, but you don't act like it. And they sat me down and told this to my face. There's like 100 of them back there. And I was sitting there. I was like, this sucks. I was like, no, I don't want to hear that. And I went home and I told Natalie, and I was all sad. And she's like, that's true. She's like, you're so nervous when you're in the big leagues. In AAA, you close games, you do anything. Like, you take the ball anytime, you throw multiple innings, you do anything that you can. And you get up to the big leagues, you're like, do I belong here? And then from that moment on, I like have it in my phone. I have all the things they said to me. I just written in the background of my phone. And I was like, I'm never going to get to the big leagues and act like I don't belong again. So I took Natalie's mindset and I acted like I belong there. And it's worked out very well ever since.
So you said you only pitched one appearance for the Mets.
Yeah.
Okay. And then how many times, I guess, did you pitch for the Angels?
Like 7 or 8 times.
Okay. And was that in the same season, 2022?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I finished the year with the Mets. I was there for about a month and a little bit up in the big leagues, the Angels. And I got to play with like Ohtani and Trout and those guys, and it was really cool. And seeing those guys play, it's like they don't even belong on the same field as the other guys. They're just so much better. But just hearing that from the Angels, I remember going into that offseason, and I was like, man, I work hard. I put in the work. I study. I do everything. But like, I just don't feel comfortable in the big leagues. And it was a mindset where it's like, you have to believe that you're better than everyone you play against. You can't take the ball in AAA and be like, these guys are nobody, and go punch the side, and then take the ball in the big leagues and be like, whoa, that's Corey Seager. Like, whoa, that guy's pretty good. Like, you cannot do that. Yeah. And so I took that mindset the rest of my career, where it's like, they're giving me the ball for a reason. I'm in the big leagues. They called the phone. They made 17 different choices to make sure that the communication got to me in the bullpen. And they want me in this game for a reason. Yeah. And you have to believe that. And the Brewers was when it kind of clicked the most, because the Brewers are like, they're the dogs. Like the bullpen are like the junkyard dogs. They're like, they want the ball. Like those guys, it was the first team I've ever been on where they'd call down the pen and be like, hey, get Trevor McGill going. And he was like, that's good. Like he was like ready to go. Like he wanted the ball more than anybody else. And like everybody was like that. They'd call Jake Junitz and he'd be like, it's my time. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do that. So every time they called me, I was like, I'm the answer to their problem. I'm going to get them out of this jam. And that's how I pitched. And that's how I've been pitching ever since. But it just sometimes like you can be as physically good as you want to be, but just that mental side where it's like, you have to 100% believe you can't just say it. You can't be like, I'm better than Corey Seager. You have to actually believe that. And that comes with work and that comes with experience. And hearing that from the Angels, like set me in the right direction. It took me about another year of like sometimes believing it, sometimes not with the Pirates. And I was up for the majority of that year. And then with the Brewers, I believed that I was like, I'm here for a reason and they don't want to see me on the mound. And you have to believe that. Like I take the mound and I just envision them in the dugout like, oh no, it's just Zastryzny. I can't hit off this guy. Yeah. He's so good. And like you just have to believe that.
Yeah. So you spent 23 with the Pirates.
Yeah.
Was that just a 1-year deal as a free agent? How'd you end up with them?
So I signed a 1-year deal with them, broke with the team for opening day. That was cool. That was when we were in Cincinnati. We were talking about before. They have opening day there. It's the first game. It's like the 1:00 game at home in Cincinnati every year. It's the coolest thing in the world. And it's the same thing. I battled it. Like I was a good leverage reliever for them for a while. I struggled for the first time in the big leagues, like over time. Like if I ever struggled with the Cubs, they just optioned me. If I struggled with the Mets, they DFA me, whatever it is. And so I struggled and then they're like, okay, you got to throw again today. And that was the first time I'd ever had to like fight through struggle in the big leagues. And so that was a really good learning experience. And I threw well at times. I threw badly at times. And I learned a sweeper and I was like throwing it 50% of the time, which was working, but it's a harder pitch to command. So my walk rate went up and like, I was just like, I don't want to walk guys. And they're like, who cares? Like you just need to get a 0. Like, you need to get no runs across the board. Who cares if you walk a guy or two? And so learning how to fail in the big leagues and succeed in the big leagues. And then it's all kind of like accumulated to who I am now. And that's someone who believes that they belong and knows that they have what it takes to pitch in the big leagues until someone takes the jersey off my back.
Did you spend that entire season in Pittsburgh?
I was there for 4 months, and then I got DFA'd, cleared waivers, went to the minor leagues for about a month, and then went back up for 3 weeks, and then the season was pretty much over at the time.
Back up with the Pirates?
Yeah, back up with the Pirates. So I spent about 4.5 months up there with them.
Okay, cool. And then from there, you end up in Milwaukee this past season. Yeah. So now we're in 2024. Yeah. How does that come about?
Same thing, minor league deal. And I remember I started throwing this hard slider cutter thing, and I fell in love with it. Like just watching it visually, I was like, okay, this thing works. Like it's getting in on righties, it's keeping lefties off balance. It's a really good pitch for me. So going into free agency that year with the Pirates were like, hey, it's a good pitch, but your sweeper is just as good. Like you don't really need to try this new thing, which they were right. Like I was just learning it. And so in the offseason, I just hammered down this cutter slider thing. And when the Brewers called me, I had it on a notepad. I was like, cutter, ! And so I was like, hey, like, I know you guys have a good pitching lab. I know you have this. I was like, I don't want to waste anybody's time. If you guys don't want me to throw this cutter thing that I have, then it's not going to work. And they were like, well, hold on. And they slipped through the PowerPoint presentation all the way to the end. And it was like cutter usage, ? 40%? And I was like, perfect. So I signed there and it was a match made in heaven. I loved it there.
Cool. And so you spent part of the season in Nashville, right?
Yeah.
How was that? And then you eventually end up with the Brewers. How did that play out?
Nashville's as close as you can get to the big leagues without being in the big leagues. It's a nice city. They pack well. You live life well. Like the food's good. The restaurants are fine, and it's just a good town to be in. But I had an opt out, and I don't know, July something, and I was throwing really well. And my agent kept reaching out to him, and they're like, wait. We have a plan. And I was like, I don't want to waste any more of my time in the minor leagues. And so my opt-out came, and I remember it was like 8 minutes before my official, like, I'm a free agent again. I got a phone call from my manager in AAA, and he's like, hey, you're going to the big leagues. And I was like, great, with who? Because part of my opt-out was another team could just take me and put me in the big leagues.
Okay.
And I was like, yeah, with who? And he's like, what do you mean? I was like, what team am I on? He was like, the Milwaukee Brewers. And I was like, okay. So I hopped on a flight the next day, and I was up there for 4 months, 3 months, something like that. Yeah, I got hurt in the middle there and finished out the year in Arizona ready to go. And if we were playing a team with left-handed hitters in the playoffs, I was going to go back to Milwaukee. And we ended up playing the Mets, who didn't have too many of them. Mm-hmm. And then we got eliminated. So my season ended with me kind of waiting to get reactivated. But yeah, I was with the Mets or the Brewers the rest of the year.
Cool. And so now ultimately you end up back where it all started. You're with the Chicago Cubs again.
Yeah.
How does that play out?
I got a call from the Brewers, and anytime you get a call right around the non-tender deadline, it's not good. And so I saw a Milwaukee number pop up because I don't really save front office numbers because I accidentally butt dialed one of the guys in the front office when I was younger, and I was like, I don't want to have their numbers because you never need to call them. They need to call you and talk to you. So I see a Milwaukee number pop up, and I was driving home from a workout, and I was like, okay, like it's not a bad thing because like you get non-tendered, I become a free agent, I probably sign a deal with somebody else, and I go whatever. Or they're just like, hey, we're going to renegotiate, whatever it is. So it's not always a bad thing. But he called me and he's like, Rob, I got bad news. And I was like, yeah. He's like, we DFA'd you. And I was like, oh, okay, like I appreciate it. Thinking he was going to be like, let's renegotiate, whatever. And he's like, and another set of bad news for us, the Cubs claimed you, so we can't get you back. And I was like, really? And as soon as he said that, I like kind of got excited. And I was like, the Cubs, really? Wow, that's awesome. And so I thanked him for all of his stuff because the Brewers are a first-class organization. I'd loved playing there. It was great. And I got off the phone, and I was like 5 minutes from the house, and I remember walking up to Natalie. She made a really cool video about it, actually. It's like also awesome TikTok. But I walked in, and I was like, I got news for you. And she was like, what? And I was like, I'm not on the Brewers anymore. And as soon as I said that, she pulled out her phone because she's the queen of content. And she was like, what team are you on? I was like, I'm not going to tell you. I was like, but I'll give you 3 guesses. So she guessed, and on the third one, she guessed the Cubs. And I was like, yeah. And then like, it's an emotional moment for both of us because like that's like she was there for every minute of my Cubs career. Like she was around. She knew all the guys there. She knew all the guys in the front office. They loved her because she was in the stands. She was on the Jumbotron in one of the AAA games. All our front office was in town, and they were playing some song, and she popped up and she was dancing. And after the game, the whole front office was like, was your wife here today? And I was like, yeah. I was pitching that day. I was like, yeah, how'd you know? And they're like, we saw her on the Jumbotron dancing. And they fell in love with Natalie just because she's the funniest girl in the world. But like everyone on the Cubs loved me and loved her. And like, I'm glad that they brought me back because that means that they appreciated me as a teammate and as a person as well. Because you don't bring back someone you don't think is like worth anything in your clubhouse. So it felt good to hear that. And then I got a call from some of the guys I knew in the Cubs, and they're like, welcome back. Like, we're excited to have you. So it was definitely like sad to be leaving the Brewers because they're a great org and I really liked it there, and they're top to bottom fantastic. But being able to come back to Chicago as the player that I know that I could have been back then and I wasn't is kind of like a full circle thing that I'm excited about. Yeah.
And even now you've got some veteran experience. You've had a lot of life experience overall. So I think, it'll be an exciting year for you this upcoming season. Fun question for you. Of all the places that you've lived while on a big league roster, so New York, Los Angeles, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, and Chicago, what is your favorite, and what is Natalie's favorite?
Chicago and Chicago. Okay. That's her favorite by far. So Chicago, it's super interesting. I didn't really know it at the time. I wasn't paying attention, but a lot of day games there, which I knew going into it. But a lot of day games means like you can go out to dinner with your family, you can go do things. So me and Natalie have tried every nice restaurant there is in Chicago, and our travel secretary with Chicago, his name's VJ. He is A1, the best travel secretary in all of baseball. Like I've had a bunch and they've all been great, but VJ's top of the line. So I call VJ and I'm like, hey, back with Chicago. Actually, he called me first. He's like, welcome back, sir. Like, very nice to have you, whatever. And I was like, VJ, I want to golf. And he's like, no problem. And he set me up at the nicest course in Arizona. Like, he just has connections everywhere.
That's awesome.
And so every time we go to dinner in Chicago, I'm like, VJ, can you set up a thing at RPM Steak? And he goes, yeah, sure. He's like, you're at 7:30 for you and your wife. And I go, okay, great. And so we'd go, and the owner would come over and be like, Rob, nice to meet you, big Cubs fan. Like, VJ called me. We comped half your meal, or we comped your meal, or like, it's just such a professional, like they love their sports teams there. Yeah. And like I said,
outside of that, Chicago City is magical. I mean, you're talking day games. This city shuts down. Everyone should be at work at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday. You have the roads are flooded with Cubs fans. And you don't get that at many places other than like Yankee Stadium or the Boston Red Sox, where it's like these iconic teams where the bleachers are packed out and the fans, like you said, the fans are just so like they know the family members because the family section usually sticks out like a sore thumb. Fans are just unbelievable. But walking to Wrigley Field from our apartment, it was just like this magical feeling that you don't get in most places. And that to me is why I love Chicago.
Yeah.
And outside of the amazing, nice
the food's good though.
You can go downtown, or you can be in a little borough, or take the train, take the L, and like it's
Yeah.
You should have said that on the mic. That was perfect.
Yeah, I know the people probably can't hear that
Yeah.
with that far away, but Natalie just told us for about a minute of why she loves Chicago and why it's awesome, and the city shuts down and all these awesome things about Chicago.
Yeah. And just to summarize what she said, because it's way better than my answer. My answer is like, I'm comparing organizations again, because that's what I know.
Yeah.
But Chicago, it's like the bars outside the stadium are filled with people as you walk to the game. I used to walk to the game from our apartment, like she said, and people would be like, Rob, go get them today. Like everybody, like they're super nice. And like she said, it's a day game. Everyone's supposed to be at work, but nope, 42,000 people are filled up the bleachers going crazy. Yeah.
It'll be a home run in this. And you hear the stadium screaming from our apartment complex. It was unreal. It was
Yeah.
just the coolest thing.
Yeah.
I've been with the World Series. Like there was just so many cool moments. Like we love tickets for a lot of fans because we didn't have people to give tickets to.
Oh, that's cool.
And so we got to meet a lot of firsthand Cub family members that are actually, like, a lot of them have passed away now, and like they still keep in touch with me. And it's like a lot of fans wouldn't do that. They would just get their tickets and move on about their life. And like we still keep in touch with some of these fans, and I think that's just really cool.
How would you find them? Would you just post like, hey, I have some tickets for Cubs fans?
It's actually such a good story. I almost want Natalie to come tell it because it's the best. But in the World Series, you have, I think we had 8 tickets total that you had access to, but you have to pay for them. Like in all
Per
big league
game?
stadiums and stuff, you pay for your tickets. So like if a big leaguer ever leaves you tickets, it gets taken out of his salary. It's not a lot. You have to pay the taxes on them, but like it depends, right? Like if you're playing a day game in Pittsburgh and there's 10,000 people there, tickets might be like $15 for the player or whatever.
Mhm.
But sometimes, like especially Wrigley, it's sold out all the time. It's like $120 for the player or whatever. So for the World Series, we had these tickets. They're like all 8 tickets are yours if you want them. So I had a bunch of my friends come out for one of the games, and I remember I called Natalie and I was like, you can't sell these tickets. Like it's illegal. Like it's tax fraud or whatever it is. Like you can't sell them. I was like, Natalie, I feel like we have an opportunity here. Like we have these tickets. I don't have anyone to give them to because like last minute guys can't fly up to Chicago or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I don't know what to do. And she was like, why don't we do this? She was like, I'll find some of these Cubs fans that have been Cubs fans for life that really don't have an opportunity, because tickets were going for like $3,000 for the World Series, like $3,000 to $5,000. And
Wow.
so like these people that have been Cubs fans forever are getting priced out of these tickets. And so Natalie's like, why don't I do this? Why don't I reach out and figure out like some of the biggest Cubs fans in the world? Some of these people who have been Cubs fans for years that have basements filled with Cubs memorabilia. Why don't I do that and see if I can find somebody like that? And so I was like, do whatever you need to do. And like, mind you, like Natalie's 21, 22. Yeah, she's 21 years old, and she's like reaching out to news stations, pick this thing up. And they're like, find the biggest Cub fan and submit them to this woman on her Instagram or on her Facebook and like on Twitter. And like Natalie found these like diehard fans. Like one woman, her whole basement was Cubs. She sat in the basement and watched every single Cubs game, but had never been to Wrigley Field because it was like a 3.5 hour drive, 4 hour drive.
She's still alive. She's like 100 and something years old.
Wow.
She's 100 years old now. And so Natalie found that this guy reaches out. He's like, oh my God, my grandma, I swear to you, she's the biggest Cubs fan in the world. And so Natalie like reads this thing this guy sends, and she's like, this one's perfect. And this
Favorite was the Chicago PD. He was a retired PD who was dying from cancer.
Oh, wow.
And then, sure enough, him and his wife both passed away from cancer. Now they both have passed away, but the daughter reached out to me like a year ago.
Yeah.
And she was like, it is a memory that till they passed away, they talked about it.
Mhm.
And I met them in the stands, and he gave me like a little badge to give to Rob. And we still
Yeah,
have that.
yeah.
And, like,
Wow.
it's just like little things like that where like I consider Chicago our home. So when he told me that we were going back to Chicago, I feel like I manifested it. Every year he was
Yeah.
free agent, I was like, I want to go back to Chicago. If it wasn't Chicago, I want to go to the Red Sox. And so when he came home, I was like, oh, it's the Red Sox. Yes, it's the Red Sox. And he was like, no. And I was like, Chicago. And I just cried because it felt like we were never going to end up back there. And to be able to go back, it's just like the coolest thing. Because like, hopefully, you're there a full season this year, and we get to experience a full year with the Cubs. But it's just an unreal city. And I can't speak on the White Sox, but like I feel like everyone's pretty much diehard Cub fans.
Yeah.
There. It's just unreal.
Yeah. And so what she said, so she gave tickets to this guy and his grandmother, who she's like now 105 years old, and she got to go to her first Cubs game in the World Series, which is great. But she said her personal favorite is Chicago PD guy. Was he retired at the time? Yeah, retired Chicago PD. He was a lifetime Chicago PD guy, and he had cancer. and she got him and his wife tickets to this game, and like she was just like she wanted to reward people that like put their whole life into Chicago, like because her experience with Chicago is great and mine is too, and it's like they put everything they have into the Cubs, and like they're tailgating before the game, like waiting for us after and waving to us. Like our hotel at 2:00 on road trips, there's 30 or 40 Cubs fans outside just wanting to say hello and wave to the players. Like they're not asking for autographs, nothing. Like they're not bothering anybody. They're just like, hey, go get them today. And then, all right, see you at the game. And they leave. Like Cubs are great. And so she got these, the Chicago PD guys tickets, and like they still reach out to her and stuff. And like,
you're fine. You do whatever you need to do.
And it's incredible how much like that city means to both of us, and like being back is incredible. Like she did tear up, and like I don't cry very often, but like when I found out, it's like getting fired from a team is not fun. But I was like, when I knew I was going to Chicago, I was like, okay, like this feels right. Like, and she did say she manifested this. She was like, we need to go back to Chicago. We need to go back to Chicago. And I was like, Natalie, that time has passed. And sure enough, it has not passed. And like, it just feels cool to be back.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that. That is so cool. As far as like AAA minor leagues, what is y'all's favorite city? I know you've probably been to a lot.
I like Des Moines. I like Nashville when I was playing it. We had connections to a golf course, which is huge for me.
Love golf.
Nashville is good. Des Moines is one of my favorites. Oklahoma City was hers. She likes these like capital cities that have like these dive bars. Like she loves going and finding like like a vintage cocktail bar. She'll be like, hey, I found this bar, and it'll be like in a barn behind a thing, and I'm like, Natalie. No.
Okay.
Nashville's like super like mainstream and like
it really
that's
is.
not Natalie's vibe. Touristy, but yeah, Des Moines, one of my favorites, just because I played there for so long. But you live like 100 yards from the field, and so your schedule, if you have a 20-minute drive, adds 40 minutes to your day. Like if you can just walk home, like I would get dressed and shower. The game would like fans would be leaving the stands, and I'd be just shuffling with them, and I'd walk home. Like it was just, I had more of a social life when you can, instead of waiting 45 minutes for a bus or like having to drive your car, but the parking lots being like one person at a time and you gotta sit and wait. Like it's nice to just walk home.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I don't think I have anything else. I thought of one thing when you were talking earlier, and this is really all I have left, but you mentioned earlier today before we started filming that you played with Orlando Salinas.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about that. I know we're going back in the conversation a little bit from your childhood days, but tell us about that.
When you reached out to me, I was like, there's a couple people I want to talk about because this is South Texas baseball, right? Like this is like something I believe heavily in, is one of the best places in the world for baseball. Like I played with studs from Georgia, Florida, California. There's hubs everywhere of great players, but for some reason, South Texas, like it should not be as good as it is. It just is. It's like you got people from all over the place, all walks of life. Like a lot of my buddies from, hypothetically, Georgia, they've been playing baseball since they were 4, and their dad played baseball, whatever. Like Corpus will just be a kid who loves baseball and wants to play.
Yeah.
And like it's just a bunch of people who fall in love with the sport. And so the people I wanted to shout out was first Logan Verrett, because he was like my pathway. I followed him, everything he did. Wyatt, because he's the reason I'm there. My parents are the best. Like they're a huge reason and everything like that. But as far as like the players go, when my dad found Orlando, it changed my entire career. Like, not that we had a career at 8 years old or 9 years old, but it changed the entire way I looked at baseball, because I wasn't the best player. And I was like, okay, like, how am I ever going to make it or play high school ball if I can't even beat these travel ball kids or play on my travel ball team or be the best player or whatever it is? And Orlando was like, I remember, I'll never forget this. He like took a look at my dad and he goes, how tall are you? And my dad's like 6'1". And he was like, how tall is your older brother? And I was like, he's already 5'10". And I was like 5'1" at the time. And he's like, you're going to grow. And he's like, and when you grow, if you have a good foundation behind you, he's like, you will take off and you will become better than all these players that are better than you. He's like, you have the bloodlines for it. He's like, you have parents that clearly support you. And he's like, and you have the love for baseball. He was like, so you may not be the best player now, but you will be. And he's like, you need to be ready for that moment. He's like, so your mechanics are going to be solid. Your mindset's going to be solid. And we're going to make sure everything else is solid with it. And sure enough, as soon as I grew, especially at the University of Missouri, everything clicked into place because of Orlando Salinas, all from that foundation where like he could have been lying to me, but I know he wasn't. Like, he was so genuine. He was like, you're a good player. He's like, looking at you, I know you're going to be good. And he's like, you have an earlier start. Nobody else comes in and sees me. He's like, all these other guys you play with, they go home and they go play video games, or they go home and they go watch the Cowboys play or whatever. He's like, you are here 3 times a week at 8 a.m. As soon as I open my front door, you and your mom get out of your car and you walk in here. He was like, you will be good. And I believed it. And he was the reason I was, for sure.
That's awesome. I love it. He's such a good guy.
He's great. And I told you this earlier, is like, people will reach out for things. Like, people will be like, oh, like, I coach that guy. Or like, you'll hear like, oh, this guy, he trained at my facility, whatever. Orlando, nothing. He's just like, he's proud of me. I know he is. And I've talked to him a couple of times since, and he's just like such a great person. And like, we lucked out because like my dad was like, who's a good coach? And he looked at like the Salinas family. He was like, they got to be good because like the dad's the coach here, and the brother played pro ball, and he had a really good career himself.
Yeah.
He's like, they got to be good. And we just lucked out getting like a really good person.
Yeah.
And like, he's just never reached out, never asked me for anything, never been like, I'm going to put your face on the wall of my facility. Nothing. He's just like, I'm proud of you. You did great. You did it all on your own. And I'm like, no, I didn't. You did it. But he's just such a good dude.
That's awesome. Well, cool. I know that aside from all that, you guys recently had a newborn.
Yeah.
That's y'all's first, right?
Yeah. First, 3 months old as of yesterday or the day before. He is every bit of everything I can handle.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I love it. Congrats again to y'all. That's
Thank you.
really exciting.
Thank you.
And y'all are in Arizona now, right? Y'all live out there.
Phoenix, Arizona. We're not sure where we're going to live full time. Where that was kind of more baseball specific. Like, Natalie sacrificed a lot, and she was like, you know what, we can live in Arizona if that's what's best for your career. And it is. Arizona for me is the capital of MLB baseball.
Yeah,
there's
definitely.
hundreds of people out there, and so if I need to throw or train with guys, like the guys I train with at Push Performance, there's guys who've made $200 million and guys who are on minor league salaries. Like, it's all guys who just want to get better, and there's just so much of that out there. And so when my career ends, or maybe right before, we'll find out a new home, but we have no idea where that's going to be.
Yeah.
No idea.
Yeah. And you guys are home for the holidays. Are both of y'all's families here in Corpus?
Yeah. They live exactly 10 minutes apart.
There you go. Cool.
Yeah. We fell in love in high school. Yeah. Natalie was a freshman when I was a senior, so we did not fall in love in high school, but I reached out to her as soon as I got back from my first season in pro ball. And I remember thinking, I was like, okay, like, people were already treating me differently. Like, this guy's been drafted, he's made it, which I had not, because I was so far away from the big leagues, it wasn't even funny.
Yeah.
But I remember thinking, like, who liked me in high school? Like, who thought I was cool in high school? And the first person I thought of was Natalie, because she had a big giant crush on me in high school. And so I hit her up and I was like, hey, like, Daddy's home. And she was like, I don't care. And like, she did not want anything to do with me. And I pushed and pursued for weeks, and finally got her to hang out with me once. And then I got a second time to hang out, and then we ended up started dating shortly after that. When I went for season, I was like, long distance, I can't do it. And then about halfway through, I started calling her like every week, and I was like, I miss you.
I love it. That's so wholesome. Well, cool. I mean, do you have anything for me? I know we've been going for almost like 2 hours.
I just think this is great. I was telling him, I watched Wyatt's and Jose's and Orlando's interview and stuff, and I just think that like shining a spotlight on this area is so important, because to me, I don't understand how it happens, but there's just the mindset here, the love for the game is so big. And it's like being able to see guys like all the guys from the last 10 years who have been drafted. It's like there's a way out. There's a way to get to the big leagues, and more guys are taking that avenue, and more guys are believing that they can do it. And like the more people that watch this video, like if you're 12, 13, 14 years old and you're like, I'm never going to play pro ball, it's like I wasn't at that age either. And it's like I just had the foundational work. I grew, and I tried every day and worked at it every day. And it's just one of those where like it is so important for people to see that like doesn't matter where you come from. Neither of my parents played sports. Like my dad and mom played hockey, and they loved hockey, and they wanted me to play hockey. It's like I found Wyatt, and we worked, and we did it. It's like you don't have to have a dad who played in the big leagues. You don't have to have a dad who has $10 million and can buy you travel stuff. Like you can play here in Corpus. You can play every day. You can work your butt off, and you can make it. And I think it's super important. And also, I love keeping up with the guys from around here, because like I just talked to Mike Velasquez for the first time in a long time, and like this facility is awesome. I didn't even know it was here, and now I'm going to come in here and throw, because like I just hanging out with a guy who played pro ball and has a sick facility like this. Like that's what I want to be around. That's why I was with Lampkin and those kids the other day.
Yeah.
Like I want to be around guys who love baseball, and that's what this place is, and that's what South Texas is.
Yeah. I think that's a great note to end it on, unless you have anything else.
I got nothing else. No.
Anything else from our director of ops?
Yeah. She just is my agent, so. Oh, PR today, yeah. Did we do good? Okay, good. We're
right.
going to have to do some editing, some off-camera stuff, but yeah, it's good.
Well, cool. Everyone, thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate you guys taking the time to watch and listen. And just like we have been with the past few episodes, I know that a lot of people listen while they're working out or driving, but if you are able to watch on YouTube or whatever, I like to sprinkle in photos now and some clips and stuff. So I'll try to work in some of those fun stories about the Cubs and stuff like that, and maybe some pictures from your high school days and Missouri days.
Yeah. And when you see those pictures of me, understand that Natalie fell in love with that. She fell in love with the skinny, scrawny kid with acne on his face. Remember that.
It's possible, everyone.
You can achieve anything.
Well, cool. Stay tuned for the next one. We've got some more fun guests lined up as we go through the holidays and the off season up until spring training and high school season. So it's nonstop around here. But Rob, thanks again for making the time. I really appreciate it, and I'm glad that this worked out. Thanks again to Mike and the Wheelhouse, and be sure to come out and get some hacks in here. But in the meantime, we'll catch you guys in the next one. Stay tuned for Rob's 2025 season with the Cubs, and hopefully we get to see some success there for him. But thanks again, everyone, and we'll catch you in the next one.
See ya.